that direction. Chapel we started in is on the next floor up. And we're at the back of this body, just one room beyond us, and that's where Charles Stewart Parnell spent 7 months over the winter of 1881-82. But I actually want to tell you about this room, because this was the condemned cell. This is where prisoners sentenced to death by hanging were held until they could be executed. Up to 1910, when the jail closed for the first time, we had, I'll come back to that point later, we had about 150,000 prisoners pass through the doors of the jail altogether. 190 of them were executed by hanging. 3 of those were women. Up to 1868, all executions had to be in public, and 140 of ours took place above the front door of the jail. But in 1868, the British government banned public executions, so we moved the gallows back into the jail and executed a further 15 prisoners within the confines of the jail up to 1910. That leaves 35. And they were indeed executed in public, but not in the jail. They were executed where their crimes had been committed, places all over the country. Among them was Robert Emmet, that's his image on the wall there. Robert had led the second rebellion in the jail's history, 23rd of July, 1803. Now that rebellion was superbly planned, but on the day, everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong. In fact, the main part of the rebellion lasted about 40 minutes. Robert did escape, but he made the fatal mistake of coming back to Dublin a few weeks later. He was 26 years of age. He was in love with a girl called Sarah Curran, and he wanted to meet her again. But he was captured by the chief of police in Dublin City town, they just saw her following a rooftop chase before he met her. In fact, he never saw her again. He was eventually brought to the jail and held in an ordinary prison cell here, not this room. Now, he was treated well in the jail because, well, he came from a powerful and rich family. His father had been the chief physician in Ireland, the main doctor in the country, and they were Protestants. It's actually worth remembering that most of our rebel leaders, indeed, right up to the late 19th century, were Protestant, not Catholic. Robert was tried in Green Street Courthouse on the 19th of September. The charge was high treason, the worst crime in the land, and the trial lasted 15 hours. He was immediately found guilty. But before the judge, Lord Norbury, could actually pass sentence, Robert insisted on addressing the court. And it was now that he made the speech that made him famous. It's a speech known today very simply as Emmet's speech from the dock, and arguably it changed world history. It's about civil rights and democracy, and it echoed around the world. Even though it's over an hour long, people like Abe Lincoln, the American president, knew the whole speech off by heart. He quoted it often to back up his own arguments on civil rights. All of our rebel leaders, of course, after Robert, especially those in 1916, inspired by that speech. And even today, people like the great Nelson Mandela still quote it. At the end of the speech, as expected, Robert was sentenced to death. He was brought back to the jail, and now he was put in this room. He was held here overnight. He stayed awake, he wrote letters all night to family, friends, and enemies. To his enemies, simply to forgive them. And the next day, the 20th, he was brought down to Thomas Street, because that's where the main part of his rebellion had taken place. And in front of St. Catherine's Church there, before a crowd, well, some say up to 45,000 people, he was hanged and beheaded at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And while all of this was happening, Robert's assistant was in the jail. Now, Robert's assistant was a young girl called Anne Devlin, 3 years younger than him, at 23 years of age. Anne was from County Wicklow, where her father Brian had been a farmer, and the Devlins were Catholics, which meant in 1803 if they couldn't own their own lands, they had to rent it. But they were doing well. Anne had volunteered to help Robert run the rebellion. On the day of the rebellion, she ran his headquarters, so she knew everyone involved in it. Most especially, she knew those who paid for it. You see, apart from Robert's own fortune, at least 50 of the leading businessmen in Dublin had invested, well, I reckon about 15 million euro in today's money into that rebellion. And the chief of police, town magistrate, wanted to know who they were. In the aftermath of the rebellion, Anne was arrested, brought to Dublin Castle, asked for the names of these men, and offered £500 in return. That was a huge sum of money, more than she could hope to earn for the rest of her life, and she refused it. So she was brought to the jail and given into the tender mercies of Dr. Edward Trevor, who by this stage was in total control of the jail. Now, when I tell you that each of those 50 men would have had a reward of £500 on their head, you can imagine the value of this information to Trevor. So he took Anne in, and Instead of putting her into a prison cell, he put her into a punishment cell. It's directly beneath this room. It's below ground, so there's no window in it. It's so narrow you can't walk across it. There was no door on it, just a gate at the front of it. No light in it, of course. No furniture either, just a bucket to use as a toilet and straw to sleep on. This is the former female wing of the jail. The front of the jail is down there in that direction. And it's the former female wing because obviously this isn't the original east wing of the jail. That was identical to the west wing, just a mirror image of it. No, this is new. That original east wing was knocked down. They replaced it with this, and this opened in 1862. And when they did that, they swapped the jail around. They put the men in here and they put the women in the old wing into what was really pretty awful conditions. A lot of those cells were unusable by now, and the women ended up 2, 3, 4 to a cell, just straw to sleep on. The men, by comparison, were in luxury here, because this was a whole new idea in jails. It's a Victorian idea, although the concept goes right back to Jeremy Bentham in the late 1700s. It's known as a panopticon jail, and it's a Greek word, and it means all-seeing eye. Because, well, the Victorians felt the old jails were wrong, like our West Wing. They just held and punished prisoners. They thought prisons should go one step further. They should also reform the prisoners. Knew the old jails wouldn't do it. You're too busy trying to stay alive. No, you needed something like this. Something that was bigger, more spacious, brighter, very much brighter. That was important. Light was very important here. Because the Victorians believed that light was good for your body and your mind, but it was also good for your soul. And that all-seeing eye, well, one of the all-seeing eyes here, of course, was God, who was going to watch you 24 hours a day. And if you showed the slightest tendency towards reform, he was going to reward you by sending his light to you through that great big glass roof up there. Also, in your cells, the windows are big now, but they're very high up. The only way you can look out those windows is to look into God's eye as he stares back at you from the sky, watches you all the time, and sends his light into the cell for you as well. But the Victorians were nothing if not practical. They also watched the prisoners themselves. You had prison guards here. It's why there's no floors in the way, so the guards can see everything. I mean, if you think the old wing we've just come from, 3 floors, 3 corridors in each, how many guards you might need over there to patrol that? Well, this is 3 times the size. There's 96 cells here. And you take what you had over there, multiply it by 3, and what do you get? You get 5. That's the number of prison guards you needed here to patrol this. Because they could get up the stairs, cross the bridges, wherever they had to go quickly. Prison guards weren't allowed on those. Prisoners weren't allowed on those. The cages weren't added in the late 1890s.